pledges to help American businesses continues to produce real results for people throughout our nation. Yesterday, I forgot to, there are a couple things that I didn't get to yesterday, so let me mention a couple of those. Yesterday afternoon, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Dr. David Shulkin, and senior White House staff met with several veteran service organizations, including what's commonly referred to as the Big Six, to discuss the President's commitment to helping our veterans and modernizing our VA. The meeting represented another step in fulfilling the President's promise to the men and women who have served our nation so honorably. I know the President looks forward to personally following up on that meeting with the VSOs. Also last night, the President named several individuals whom he intends to nominate or appoint to key administration posts. Courtney Simmons Elwood, General Counsel of the Central Intelligence Agency; Noel Francisco, Solicitor General at the Department of Justice; Jeffrey Rosen, Deputy Secretary of Transportation; John J. Sullivan, General Counsel at the Department of Defense; Ajit Pai, member of the Federal Communications Commission; and Tony Saig, Jr., the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Department of Treasury. Expect further announcements as the week goes on. Now on to the events of the day. This morning, after receiving his daily intelligence briefing, the President met with Lorraine Powell Jobs, the founder and president of Emerson Collective, an organization dedicated to removing the barriers that unfortunately prevent some in the world from achieving their full potential. They discussed education and immigration policy, which are two of the areas that Emerson Collective focuses on. Then the President held a strategic affairs lunch focused on infrastructure with leaders in the private sector. Infrastructure used to be a point of American pride, but now an overbearing, ineffective regular system can keep projects in limbo for years. The President has already started removing the regulatory roadblocks that have been killing projects before they've even begun through his executive actions, streamlining the permitting process and calling for each agency throughout the government to identify regulations that cause undue burden. As the President has said many times, strong public-private partnerships will also be key to revitalizing our country's ruined roads, crumbling bridges, and outdated airports. The government has wasted too much of the taxpayers' money on inefficient and misguided projects. By looking at infrastructure from a business person's perspective, as the President and these executives do, we can restore respect for the taxpayer dollar and make the best investment. The President was particularly pleased to be holding this meeting now that Secretary of Transportation Chao, EPA Administrator Pruitt, and Energy Secretary Perry are all confirmed and getting to work. In attendance at the lunch, as I mentioned, were Secretary Chao, Secretary Perry, Administrator Pruitt, and then Richard Lefrak, the CEO of Lefrak, Steve Roth, the CEO of Vornado Realty Trust, Josh Harris, co-founder of Apollo Global Management, Bill Ford, the CEO of General Atlantic, Lynn Scarlett, the Managing Director of the Nature Conservancy, Tyler Duvall, the partner at McKinsey, and Elon Musk of SpaceX. Later this afternoon, the President will meet with Congressman Elijah Cummings to discuss rising prescription drugs prices. I know the President's looking forward to continuing the dialogue that they started a few weeks ago on the phone. At 4 o'clock, the President will meet with Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, Senator Murkowski, and Senator Sullivan of Alaska. They're expected to discuss the priorities of the Department of Interior, especially as it pertains to the government-owned lands in Alaska. This evening, the President will meet with conservative leaders about health care. We'll have more details and participants on that meeting a little bit later this afternoon. The President and the Vice President continue to reiterate their support for the House bill on Obamacare repeal and replace, and look forward to working with Congress to institute a new health care system. Tonight, the President will have dinner with Senator and Mrs. Cruz, and finally, a couple of additional administration announcements. Today, the President and the First Lady announced the initial details for the 139th White House Easter egg roll taking place on Monday, April 17th. They are honored to continue the traditions of the past while creating new ones that will play a lasting role in the fabric of our nation's history. Tickets to the Easter egg roll are free to the public and will be allotted through an online lottery. Further details on the lottery and information on that day will be released later this month. Keep an eye on whitehouse.gov for updates on that. I'm also pleased to announce, a little bit proud, that the Taoiseach Kenny of Ireland will be visiting the White House for the traditional St. Patrick's Day visit on March 16th. We'll have further details on that visit as well as the other foreign leader visits later this week. With that, some questions. David Smith of The Guardian.
Hi, Charlie. Can I ask, about the President's state visit to the UK. Is there timing for that, and what was your reaction to some members of Parliament in Britain saying the President is not welcome? They actually use words like racist and sexist. Has that led him to reconsider?
The President, as you know, accepted Her Majesty's invitation when the Prime Minister was here. He looks forward to going over and visiting the United Kingdom. As we have details to share with you further, we will, but there's nothing further at this time. Caitlin.
Does the White House have a reaction to the Iranian vessels coming within 150 yards of a Navy ship over the weekend? Aren't they on notice, and will you offer anything beyond a verbal reaction? And then I have a follow-up question.
Okay. The USNS ship that was in close proximity is obviously something that the President has been made aware of. The President's been very clear that this provocative action is something that won't be tolerated. With that, I would refer you to the Department of Defense, who's monitoring that situation, and will talk about the appropriate actions they may take. Your next one.
And then secondly, does he have any plans to revamp the H-1B visa program by the April 1 deadline?
I think we've talked before about immigration as a whole. I think there is the legal part of immigration and then the illegal part of immigration. The President's actions that he's taken in terms of his executive order and other revamping of immigration policy have focused on our border security, keeping our country safe, our people safe, and then obviously whether it's H-1B visas or the other ones, spousal visas, other areas of student visas. I think there is a natural desire to have a full look at, comprehensive look at that. He discussed the RAISE Act yesterday with Senators Perdue and Cotton. We'll have more on that coming forward, but I think as the readout mentioned, he was very supportive of their efforts with respect to how we view legal immigration. He mentioned in his joint address that we're one of only a handful of countries that doesn't use a merit-based system of immigration, and that is something that we need to look at in its totality. Hunter.
Thank you, Sean. I had two quick questions. Are you aware of any women who work at the White House who are participating in the strikes today? And also more generally, what is the administration's reaction to this protest? And do you think it's an effective way, skipping work is an effective way for women to demonstrate their power and significance?
On the first part, I am not aware of any that are not here. I think everyone that I'm aware of has shown up and is working really hard to advance the President's agenda. They're committed to moving this country forward. For those of us who have joined the President throughout government, I think, but obviously, as the President stated today, we want to recognize the contributions that women make to our businesses, to our families, to our economy, to our society. And, you know, it's a free country. People have the right to express themselves. But I think that we should, on a daily basis, not just one day a year, but 365 days a year, appreciate the contributions that women make in all of those categories. So it shouldn't be a daily thing, and it's hopefully we can help fix that a little bit more. John.
Thanks a lot, Sean. There seems to be this groundswell of conservative opposition to the health care bill that was offered up by leadership in the House of Representatives. You mentioned the President's going to be meeting this evening with conservatives. What is his message to those individuals? Are they members of the Freedom Caucus? Will Senator Rand Paul be there? And can you give a sense about what the President intends to do to turn around that opposition that was quite apparent yesterday?
So a few things on that. One, as I mentioned, we'll have a list of participants later. Two, I think that there has been a lot of, from business and conservative groups have been very supportive of this, whether it's Americans for Tax Reform, Americans Taxpayers Union, the Medical Device Manufacturing Association, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, AvaMed, One Nation Health, Consumer Health Products Association, the Association of AMAC, the National Association of Wholesale Distributors, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and others. There's been tremendous support for this. We've had people throughout Washington, D.C. going to different associations and groups throughout the days, last couple of days, talking about the benefits of this. And we're going to continue to do outreach. He met, as you know, yesterday with the House Whip team, expressing his unwavering support for the bill and the process that's about to encounter. He'll work with these individuals today. And we're going to have a full court press. Our team is throughout the administration on local radio and local television to get that message right to the American people. To talk about both of the things that we talked about yesterday, why we have a crisis right now in healthcare and why Obamacare is failing. But then secondly, why the solution that the president's worked on with the House is the right one to bring down costs and to reinstitute choice. So that message is going to continue to get delivered both today and for the next several weeks until it passes the House and the Senate and comes back to his desk. But again, one of the important messages that I think those on the conservative side need to understand is right now there is an uneven playing field. If you get your insurance through Medicaid, Medicare, through the government, or an employer-based health care, you are untaxed, your employer's untaxed. It is those self-employed individuals, those small businesses that are paying the penalty for this. And that's what I think we have to remember is that we talk so often on the conservative side and on the Republican side about the importance of entrepreneurship, the importance of small businesses to our economy. And yet they're the ones who suffer right now with an inequity in the tax system. And I think that by leveling that playing field and by giving them more options and driving down cost, we're actually doing a very conservative thing here. By removing the mandate of a government-mandated, you must buy this program or you will pay a penalty, and eliminating choice, we are enacting, I think, very strong conservative values in health care that give all Americans more choice at a lower cost. So I think that should be a very positive message, John.
Yes, thank you. As a brand new federal employee, I'm sure you're aware.
Current, welcome back.
Yes, well, at the moment.
Thank you.
I'm sure you and your family are aware that Office of Personal Management offers a very comprehensive health care program called the Federal Employees Health Benefit Program.
Yes.
You and anyone in this building, on the Hill, their staff, their family, their friends, not their friends, their family, can, well, maybe, who knows? Very generous. No, it's state of the art. The individuals involved in the healthcare situation right now, the debate, no matter how it plays out, can they really have the kind of sympathy and empathy for individuals who may not benefit nearly as much when they're negotiating all these plans, Sean?
In what respect?
Well, I mean, you're fine. You're covered.
Sure,
Yeah.
but it's unfortunate. First of all, I'm not fine because I think because of Obamacare, premiums on everybody have gone up. No, regardless of what you pay, federal employees make a contribution to their health care plan as well. And I think that all premiums have increased over the last, whether you're in an employer-based system or not. So one of the big issues with Obamacare was in order to fix a problem that faced 15 to 20 million people is that the entire system got shattered and prices on everybody got ratcheted up. People who were on Medicaid suddenly lost their ability. So the issue is that in an attempt to solve a problem that affected a very specified and defined group of people, we affected the entire healthcare market. So whether or not you get it from an employer or not, but to your question, that's part of the issue. Hold on. Here's the issue. You're right. You're absolutely right. Right now, if you're a federal employee, in a lot of cases in state, you get to open a book and you get to look at what plan matters to you. What plan is best for you or your family? How much do you want to pay? How much coverage do you want to have? What's the copay you're willing to risk? What services or benefits do you want as part of your plan? Absolutely. But the issue is for so many Americans, they don't have that choice. For a third of for a third of the counties in this country, they've got one choice. One. And in a lot of states, they've got none, or the exchanges are becoming fewer and fewer. The number of doctors and plans that take Medicaid, fewer and fewer. So to your point, I think actually we're in a unique place because we get to understand what the average American should get, that we shouldn't be limited to a specified number of people.
I appreciate your argument. Very well taken.
Thank you.
However, I'm going to compare a GS5 or a GS9 to a senator or a secretary of one of the agencies.
Okay.
I mean, the safety net on those individuals gives them a certain cushion. And they're negotiating, but do they really have that kind of compassion or that kind of empathy for the people who, in fact, may be thrown off the health care?
I mean, I think that just because somebody has health care doesn't mean that they can't empathize with somebody who doesn't. We all have family and friends that are suffering. I mean, that's like saying because I have a job, I can't be empathetic to somebody who doesn't have a job. I mean, we all have family or friends. It's the same thing when we watch a friend or a family member suffer through a terminal disease. Because we haven't suffered through it doesn't mean that we can't have compassion towards that person or be concerned on how much that bill is costing them. I mean, that's actually, in some ways, it's depending on the relationship you have with that person, you can even feel worse. You can feel guilty about how much you have and how you're not able to help that person. I think in many cases that's what drives us, is to know that there are options available to some Americans and not others.
I appreciate your response.
Thank you. John.
John, we've confirmed that there is a criminal investigation into this alleged theft of cyber tools from the CIA by WikiLeaks. What can the White House tell us about the situation, in particular the fact that it seems like there's another leak from the intelligence community that's on the scale of Edward Snowden? And can you assure the American people that none of these tools have ever been used against them?
Well, there's a couple things in that. Number one, for obvious reasons, it is our policy as a government not to confirm the authenticity of any kind of disclosure or hack. That would be highly inappropriate for us. But all of these occurred under the last administration. That is important. All of these alleged issues, and I think it's interesting to have it asked this way about the damage that could have occurred or what tools could be used in light of what's been going on recently. I mean, we've had, your own network's correspondent James Rosen had his phones, multiple phones, tapped. What is, was that appropriate back then? I think there's a lot of concern out there about alleged leaks. I mean, there's two steps to this, and I think what you saw over the last week in terms of this should be a major concern to people in terms of the leaks that are coming out and the desire to get to the bottom of them, whether or not specifically with respect to the disclosure that you're referring to, but I think the idea that we are having these ongoing disclosures of national security and classified information should be something that everybody is outraged in this country. This is the kind of disclosure that undermines our country, our security, and our well-being. And you've seen over the last 2 years, depending on the leak, it depends on the outrage. It's interesting how whether the leak occurred under the last administration, you had member after member talking about disclosures that occurred during the last administration, whether it was members of Congress. Elijah Cummings expressed concern during the last administration in terms of the Americans that were, when it dealt with Hillary Clinton, there was complete outrage about the leaks that occurred, members calling for investigations into the leaks. It's interesting how there is sort of a double standard with when the leaks occur, how much outrage there is. And so I do think it's important, while I don't want to get into confirming or denying this particular thing, I think it is interesting how different subjects are approached. This one, everyone is immediately rushing to, and there should be a lot more coverage of this. This alleged leak should concern every single American in terms of the impact it has on our national security.
Can I ask something unrelated?
Of course you can.
Robin Shahini has been imprisoned in Iran since last October for collaborating with a hostile government, that government being the United States of America. He's on a hunger strike. Apparently his health is suffering. Is the President aware of Mr. Shahini's plight and that of 3 other Americans who are being held in Iran? And what, if anything, might the President be doing about it?
Yeah. So obviously we're aware of the situation. In that particular case, I would refer you to the State Department.
I wanted to go back to an earlier question. What is the President personally going to be doing in order to sell this health care bill? And what's he going to do to convince reticent lawmakers to come along, people like Rand Paul who don't like it?
Well, I mean, we're on day 2. As I mentioned, we've been out in local talk radio and local markets. The President yesterday met with the House Deputy Whips. Today, he's having a series of additional meetings with conservative groups, with others. He's already talked to insurance agents. I mean, we've talked about the lead up to this with the insurance executives, with companies, with various members of the House and the Senate from both parties. He met with governors, attorneys general. I think there's a group of lieutenant governors coming in. We're going to be aggressively going after talking about the solution that we have for health care, both the need to repeal the current Obamacare system and the need to replace it with something that gives patients the choices and costs that they need. As I mentioned yesterday, and I can't overstate this, there's a difference between having a card and having care. Being told you have coverage and not being able to use it is no good. And that's the thing that I think is really important. When we get asked the question so often, how many people are going to be covered? That's not the question that should be asked. How many people are going to get the care they need? Having coverage with a high deductible, and in some cases, or not having a plan that allows you to get the coverage you need or afford it, isn't real coverage. It's a card. And I think that's the big difference in the approach that we're taking here. It's how do we get people the affordable care they need, that there's more choice, that more doctors are coming into the system instead of leaving. And that is a big, big difference in the approach that's happening now. Cecilia?
On the road to try to sell it?
I think you will see a lot of travel and a lot of activity by the president and all of the administration. And it's not just going to be the president. It's going to be, the secretary, the directors, key administration staff. The vice president's been actively engaged in meeting on the Hill, on talk radio, on local television. You've seen a flurry of meetings with outside interests, with op-eds explaining the problem and engaging groups and associations and that have an interest in this, and industry leaders. But this is going to be a very, very aggressive, comprehensive approach to making sure that every American understands that there is a major problem and that we are here to fix it. Cecilia.
On WikiLeaks, I want to go back to that. Two parts. Is the president outraged by this?
Well, I mean, again, I don't want to. The allegations. He has been very clear about the concern that he has for leaks. This is, well, again, Cecilia. I think he is very concerned about the allegations that are out there in terms of what may or may not happen. It is an allegation. It is something that we are not going to confirm at this time. But as you can imagine from the president's previous comments, he is extremely concerned about this, about these allegations, about this, about the potential that something, if this were true, would have on our national security. And make no mistake about it, I think the president has talked before that anybody who leaks classified information will be held to the highest degree of law. We will go after people who leak classified information. We will prosecute them to the full extent of the law. This is playing with our nation's national security is not something that should be taken lightly under this administration.
On this one, when it came to the campaign and Hillary Clinton, the president said, quote, "I love WikiLeaks." Does he still feel that way today?
There is a big difference between disclosing John Podesta's Gmail accounts about a back and forth and his undermining of Hillary Clinton and his thoughts on her on a personal nature, and the leaking of classified information. There is a massive, massive difference between those two things. And I think it is, again, the interest and the outrage that occurred last year by a lot of Democrats when it came to leaks is interesting that we're hearing not as much outrage now when it comes to some of our issues of national security. April.
Sean, a couple of questions. One, you said Congressman Cummings, you affirmed Congressman Cummings is meeting with President Trump today.
Yes.
In the last press conference, solo press conference the president had, he talked about Senator Schumer telling Elijah Cummings not to come. What happened to smooth this over, and what is the conversation going to be about? Is it just going to solely be on the high cost of prescription drugs?
Well, I think that the nature of the meeting stems from the conversation they had on the phone, which was on prescription drugs, and then I'm sure that if Congressman Cummings or the President brings up another subject, it'll go there. We'll try to have some sort of readout afterwards, depending on how that goes. But it's the nature of it is an area where they agree. And if you remember, one of the things that they talked about on the phone was that there were probably several more areas that they would agree on and find that they would agree on throughout a conversation. And I hope that conversation, does exactly what they said that it would in terms of, getting to those areas of common agreement where they can work together to help solve additional problems that our country faces.
So you don't have any knowledge of what happened to smooth that over for him to
I know our teams were in touch with his office immediately followed, and as you know, there were a couple times when the meetings had been tried to be scheduled and just didn't work out, and luckily now it was able to.
He's one member of the 49 of the CDC. Right after that press conference, the White House reached out to the Congressional Black Caucus, to Cedric Richmond, the head of the caucus. Where is that meeting? Where does that meeting land? Is it happening?
I know that we've reached out, and we're looking for a date on that as well. But so we're pleased that this one was able to come together, and then we'll get to the next. Yeah.
Yesterday there was a compare and contrast with visual show and tell, if you will.
Yes, I saw that on a few
Yes,
shows.
you were there. Yes. And you compared and contrasted about how you're going about it and how the Obama administration went about Obamacare. One difference that they've made note of, and I want to get your response to this, is the fact that you may have this and said that you're doing this versus what they're doing. But one thing that they say that you did not do, that they did, had their bill scored by CBO, and you did not score it by CBO.
Sure, it is being scored. Look, look, with all due respect to them, this is the same group that said, who passed it and then told us we could read it. This bill is online for every American to go to readthebill.gop. It's on the Speaker's website. We link to it on several accounts that we've tweeted. I understand that. And again, if that's the complaint, this is the same group that didn't let anybody read it, that did it, that jammed it through with no bipartisan support. This president's reached out to both sides of the aisle, had governors here, has senators here to get their input. There is no contrast between what we did and what they did. This was a full effort to reach out to the members in the House and the Senate. It's going through regular order in the House. Every member of the House and the Senate will be able to have their opportunity to have amendments offered through the committee process and on the floor. So the idea that they can compare the date that they got a score is pretty reaching deep on this, because there's been an opportunity for members to have their input on this and to talk about their concerns, to give their input on it, especially the governors who were left on the sideline last time and who have such an important role in administering health care when it comes to Medicaid. The idea that anyone talks about when the score was issued, there'll be a score in all good time. But the other thing is, let's be honest, the irony of the score is that the CBO was way off the last time. I don't think that that we're waiting to, that's a big issue to us right now. Of course cost matters, but look at how off they were last time. If you're looking to the CBO for accuracy, you're looking in the wrong place. They were way, way off last time in every aspect of how they scored and projected Obamacare. In terms of, but neither did they. Last time, if you look at the number of people that they projected would be on Obamacare, they are off by millions. So the idea that we're waiting for a score, it will be scored, but the idea that that's any kind of authority based on the track record that occurred last time is a little far-fetched. Jessica.
Two questions on the wall, Sean. As you know, the bids for prototypes went out today, and I just was curious about the timing of that, how much pressure there was to get that going quickly, and then secondly, is there guidance from the White House about what kinds of vendors can build the wall, especially can international vendors build the wall?
I think that process is working through, as the president has talked about before. We're trying to move ahead with existing funds that DHS has, and then we will continue to create a timeline to ask Congress for that funding. We're working with Congress on that. And then, I don't think it'll be any surprise to know that the president is going to favor American workers and American companies when it comes to an American project. That should be any kind of surprise. Blake.
It's looking increasingly likely that the Federal Reserve next week will hike interest rates. Two brief questions. One, how does the president feel about that? And secondly, does he have the full confidence of Janet Yellen, who he described during the campaign as too political to lead the Federal Reserve to set monetary policy?
Let me get back to you on that one. I don't have any comment on the Federal Reserve. I'll look at the team. What I will say is that, as I mentioned at the outset, when you look at the hiring and the jobs and the manufacturing and the pace, the consumer confidence and the CEO indexes that have already come out in the first 2 months, we see a resurgence in optimism in the economy by job creators to want to hire here, who want to manufacture here, who want to grow here. And I think that our economy is clearly on the upswing. And I think you see statement after statement, company after company, coming out and sharing in the president's vision for moving the country forward and for renewing the optimism in building and being part of an American resurgence in terms of our economy.
The no comment was on Mrs. Yellen or on his thoughts of a rate hike?
I'll get back to you on both. How's that? Yeah, go ahead.
April's last question about the difference between this administration and the previous one and how to approach this issue. One thing that the Obama administration did do was get key stakeholders to the table. The AARP, the American Medical Association. Both of those organizations have come out today strongly opposed to this proposal. What's your message particularly with respect to the AARP? And
I think the AARP got a really good deal last time when it came to prescription drugs in particular. I think this is a patient-centric bill. It's about patients, it's about people, it's about the Americans who left behind. Look at what those deals got people last time. For all those people that are on Medicaid in particular, they don't have choices anymore. So I would argue that the president has put the American people first and has put patients first. So you can talk about, we're glad to have support. Make no mistake about it. But I think that the support that this administration and I think the House is focused on is getting every American their buy-in and their support. That's, obviously, look, we'd love to have every group on board, but this isn't going to be, every single deal we heard about it getting through, like the Cornhusker kickback, this and that, over and over again. It was one deal after another to buy votes to get it through the Senate. So if you want to line up how many special interests got paid off last time versus now, they'll probably win hands down. This isn't, hold on, but this isn't about trying to figure out how many special interests in Washington we can get paid off. It's about making sure that patients get the best deal that lowers prices and bring back costs. But again, I think what I'm trying to figure out is at some point you're defending the indefensible. Nancy Pelosi put out 3 criteria for how they judge Obamacare, and by their own standards, they fail on all 3. Costs are up, choices are down. There's no other way to judge that. By every account, every single premium, by every standard, is up. Choices are down across the country. So there is a horrible deal that the American people got sold. And what we're trying to do is put patients back first in line.
So the AARP is specifically talking about patients in their 50s and 60s. The AARP describes this as an age tax that will disproportionately affect people who right now are low income, benefiting from subsidies under Obamacare, and could stand, according to the AARP's estimate, to take a hit of thousands of dollars in their premium payments each year when the subsidies go away and the tax credits go in. What's your message to those people who voted for the president?
Right, and the message for the president is that we want you to get more choice and a lower cost. And I think that as we work this bill through daylight, not jam it through in the middle of the night, that they're going to see, as more and more people will, that this is a deal for the American people that's going to put patients first, lower their costs, and give them more choices. But again, there is probably not a person out there, either through themselves or a loved one or a friend or a colleague, that has seen choices go down and premiums go up. So what people are dealing with now is not acceptable. And I think that the idea that anyone is defending the current status quo, and even in some of the statements of some of the groups, they admit that there's a problem right now. And so my advice to those people is join the process. Share your ideas, share your thought, let the process work its will so that it is a bill that has input. But the bill, the way it was done last time, is not something that's acceptable. Shannon.
Is the president worried, though, that every major doctors group, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American College of Physicians, have all come out and said they have serious concerns? For all the talk of doctors and patients and choice, the doctors groups are all so far unanimously coming out and saying they're not supportive of this. Is that concerning?
I think when you look at a lot of doctors versus the associations here in Washington, we have had tremendous input from doctors themselves. Dr. Price himself, a doctor, is the one who crafted this. So you have a doctor in charge of the administration.